he tried to play it off as a joke. Like, he was like, guys, I'm joking. And I was doing that. And I was like, no, I genuinely think you were trying. And it was so unsmooth.
It's like when I had too much vodka 700 feet below the Baltic Sea or something.
He didn't object to murder as such, provided it was carried out politely and that the person really deserved it.
And he kind of gave him the idea for Watergate based on like previous political interactions that he had had.
Let's go beyond the first page. Let's go beyond the first page.
Welcome back, Second Pagers. This is Beyond the First Page podcast with siblings Phoebe, Phil, and Isaac. I'm Phoebe.
I'm Phil.
I'm Isaac.
And this is Club Meeting 43. Buckle up for this title. It is the 100-year-old man who climbed out the window and disappeared. It's by Jonas Jonasson. And it is a funny book, which we will get into. But before we start that, I wanted to give our new listeners or people who haven't listened in a while, maybe a kind of rundown of where they should start for the podcast. So I think one of the beauties of this podcast is that it's archived, obviously, on Spotify and YouTube, wherever you find your podcasts. So if you're maybe not reading on the pace that we are, you can go back anytime once you've read the book and listen to the podcast, listen to the discussion. And I wanted to ask you guys, for the readers, what podcast should they start with? So what book was good and then the discussion was even better when they come on and listen to the podcast? And I'll turn it over to you, Isaac, first for that.
So my, I think, favorite podcast that we've done is Club Meeting 39 with Sydney Mays, and she is actually not a author of books. She's an author of, well, maybe she is, but we talked about her poetry.
She is writing a book.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
She is writing a book.
She is writing a book, but we talked about her poems, specifically the Walker System and Nashville, Tennessee, and she was great to have on. She was so down to earth, especially talking about poetry. So we had an awesome conversation. She's a fellow Vanderbilt student with Phil. But she also read one of her poems for us, which was very eye-opening, like hearing the author read their own work. It was like getting to watch a, painter explain why they chose the painting they did and then watch them get to paint that piece of work. So it was really cool. And I would start with that one. Also, super low barrier to entry because one of her poems is like only a paragraph long. So if you don't really want to read a lot, like this is a great place to start.
Yeah, for sure. And the other one she's reading on the podcast. So you just listen and you can hear the whole thing on there, like Isaac said. So yeah, that's probably the best answer. I would agree. I really enjoyed that discussion because I think I also got to learn a lot from her, which was very cool. So definitely agree with you, Isaac, and would second that and definitely recommend it to our listeners. Phil, what about you?
I think I would actually go Martyr by Kaveh Akbar as a podcast. I did not like the book, but we had a guest, Noelle Heiser, who came on and she really liked it. And I really did not. And then Phoebe and Isaac were somewhere in between. And it was just a really good discussion. I think it was a interesting book. Actually, a fun fact, but Kaveh Akbar taught Sydney at the University of Iowa School of Writing.
Yeah, that was so random.
Which was cool. And
of course, we found that out after I just bashed him.
Isaac just bashed Kaveh Akbar. Yes,
well,
that is true.
You didn't bash him. I want to put that on the record. You just said like that wasn't your cup of tea necessarily. Not that he's not a talented author. I want to make that distinction for the listeners.
Yeah, so I thought that was a really good one.
Yeah, I was actually also going to say that as a second choice as well. I think one of the reasons I love talking about books with Noelle is she always has a very different perspective than me on a lot of things. So I'm glad you guys also seem to enjoy that discussion. I hope our listeners did as well. And it's a pretty short book. So if you wanted to read and then listen, it's a low barrier to entry. It's just kind of a mind trip, that book is. So Yeah, mine would be Baseball Gaijin by Aaron Fishman. He also came on and talked with us. And I think
that was
you're
my
hearing it.
third one as well.
Yeah. You're hearing a trend of like basically when it's not just the three of us yahoos sitting around.
So we should work on that.
Yeah. We're trying to deliver more authors and people who like books to all of you. But so if you know about books or know someone who does and wants to talk, let them know they could be a guest on the pod. But yeah, it was very interesting to talk to him about how he had developed this relationship with basically just not a all-star by any mean player in the MLB, and his backstory going to Japan and then coming to the US to play baseball, and just his research style and everything. He was a really awesome guest. So I would recommend that book, even if you're not into baseball. And then I would also recommend listening to that podcast. So cool. Well, I hope that helps our listeners orient themselves a little bit. And I think without further ado, we should talk about The 100-Year-Old Man. So Isaac, would you give us that book in 60 seconds?
Yeah. So I'll actually give it to you in 15 seconds.
Oh, yeah. Will you, though? Will you?
So this book is about Alan Carlson, who runs away from his old folks' home that he lives in on his 100th birthday. He, at the bus stop, steals this young man's suitcase because the kid is kind of rude to him. And it turns out the suitcase belongs to a drug gang and is filled with a ton of money. And this causes a manhunt across Sweden looking for this old guy, partly because he's missing and partly because dead bodies are kind of trailing him and his cohorts. During his runaway, and as we learn about him, we get his backstory, and he has had run-ins over his 100 years with famous characters like General Franco, Harry Truman, Mao, Stalin, and Winston Churchill, and is around significant events throughout the world.
Okay, pretty good, Isaac. You were very close to 15 seconds there, I think. And for our listeners, I think you're maybe hearing this summary and thinking to yourself, like, is this book good? Because it sounds so ridiculous. And then is it like supposed to be funny? And it definitely was supposed to be funny. And I thought it was funny. I thought it was very entertaining. I think you run the risk of being very cheesy with a book like this, in my opinion. And I think it wasn't at all. And it actually, I'm going to draw like a very weird comparison here. And I'm curious if you guys have read this book. We're going to read it later on the podcast, and there's actually a movie being made about it. It's called Project Hail Mary. It's by the same person that wrote The Martian, and it's one of those books that I read and did not expect to enjoy and then loved. Very different genre, but the same kind of thing as this book. Like I said, I was nervous it was going to be cheesy going in, and I thought it was very funny. I thought one of the funniest parts was when Alan was talking to Nixon after he met him and was reporting about, the Russian nuclear activities to him. And he kind of gave him the idea for Watergate based on like previous political interactions that he had. I just thought it was so cleverly written. And if you didn't know about like world politics, you may have missed that. And there was some like very subtle interactions that he had that I just thought were very clever and very funny. And I wanted to hear what you guys thought about that as well.
Yeah, I also thought it was funny. In one of the old episodes, I think maybe last year, one of our opening questions was like, what do you like in a book, like to either laugh or cry? And I said laugh because I think it's very difficult to do. And there were several parts of this book where I read and listened to this, so I was switching back and forth, and where I was vocally chuckling about the interactions that was happening to this. One of the funniest things that I thought was when he gets finally tracked down by the prosecutor, and they come up with this big plan that the inspector, the cop, is kind of in on it now. He's like, this is crazy, but I am so happy to be kind of friends with these people that he's kind of in on their whole charade and is getting a cut of the money now. So they come up with this plan to lie to the prosecutor, who is trying to save his own career because he has bungled this investigation so much. And the prosecutor's trying to get this information, and Alan keeps like going on and on
Talking.
down these tangents. And it's kind of at the end of the book, so he's referencing all the stuff that you've already read about.
Right.
So one of the first things he goes, it's something about weighing in, and he's like, "Oh, I think it's terrible to weigh people." And, another thing, they're talking about the smell of the dead body, and Alan's like, "Well, I'm close to 100. Can you smell the death of a person coming early?" And then one of the funniest references is like, "My tongue is only sipped twice. One in the East and one in the West when I was helping creating the atom bomb." And he's like, "When I had too much vodka 700 feet below the Baltic Sea or something." It's just so ridiculous. And the prosecutor is getting so mad, and you can just tell it's all part of this plan. I was just dying laughing at that part of it.
Yeah, that was a really good build-up scene at the end there. I completely agree. That was a great scene.
Yeah, I think my funniest parts, though, were just his such dry humor, where I can just imagine him as a lecturer that just says some funny shit, but does not pause at all. And then you're just like, wait, was that a joke or was that not a joke? The one time where he's like, Alan didn't object to traveling with an elephant, provided it wasn't too much trouble. And then he's just like, wait, what? And then he's like, the corpse count had grown again, and Alan felt that it was starting to get a bit tiresome. And it's just like, people are literally dying. And then the last one, he's like, he didn't object to murder as such, provided it was carried out politely and that the person really deserved it. Just like stuff like that like really gets me, because the author just like immediately moves on and you're just like, wait, that was low-key hilarious, like very funny thing to say.
Subtle. I thought you were talking about Alan and if he was joking, because I saw online a lot of the comparisons that people drew were to Forrest Gump, and kind of this like he was potentially unaware of how crazy his life was or the things were happening to him. This was just kind of a status quo because he was just doing him, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know if I guess I didn't think too much about that. I just was like, this is the character, you know, this is his vibe. It's just he's doing what's interests him next, and he's not political, and that's his vibe, you know?
Yeah. There's definitely a nonchalance for the character. So I think you can see where he's not an idiot, because he teams up with Herbert Einstein, who is an idiot. An amazing character.
That was so hilarious.
Yeah.
He like maneuvers them out of a Russian gulag into North Korea, meeting the first
Kim Jong-il.
And then he meets back up with Mao and then gets to Indonesia somehow, all on the American dime that they sent to the people who were fighting communism in China. But so he's not stupid, but there's some quotes that I put down that were like his life philosophy. Things are what they are, and whatever will be, will be.
That's a good one.
And like, he's just like, you know, this guy who is just like going to sort of just let life be. He's not.
Yeah, he's like, there's the only thing you can do in the rain is let it rain. And it's just like, okay. Like, shit hits the fan, and it's just going to hit the fan.
Which, I think of myself as kind of like the attitude. I find myself giving advice to people with sort of that being like, well, there's nothing you can do about it, so let's not like.
That's very much your vibe.
But at the same time, and like, if I meet people like this is to the extreme though. Like, I would be like, want to throttle him, being like, oh, like, how are you getting away with this? Yeah, like.
Yeah. Did you hear Phil? That is definitely not my vibe.
Just my exact opposite vibe. Like what I wish my vibe was.
Yeah.
No, the whole thing about like being
this is to an extreme that would be like detrimental to a normal person,
to your health.
Yeah.
I think it's different
than
Forrest Gump, because like I think you guys are right, and I had a quote too that he just recognizes what's happening around him, where he's like, Alan had always thought it was more fun to be around people who are smarter than he was. That way he learned something. And then the next quote is, but on the other hand, it was also quite relaxing to hang out with idiots. And it's just like, so he like sort of he gets it for sure. He's just like, this is going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of maybe this is like, I don't know where this would go, but I kind of feel like though he had the luxury of, I mean, not luxury, he was sterilized in the book.
Yeah.
So he was never able to have a family until the very end. And I mean, it would be a little bit freeing because he had no commitments. I mean, his parents were dead, he had no family. So I think that also allows you to be more
Like live
flexible
without
with
any
your life. Yeah,
consequences.
because he was
Yeah,
like,
that's
even if I do this crazy thing, it's gonna affect literally no one but me. Well, actually not true because he did create the atom bomb.
For several countries.
right. And I think, honestly,
Yeah.
I do think that was a little bit. I think this book was fun and stuff, but I think Swedish writers, and who I compare this with is Frederick Bachman, who wrote The Man Called
Totally.
Ove, and then he wrote
Right.
My Friends, and he also wrote
Mhm.
the Beartown, which is just a narrative book, and it's sort of a thriller, but all of his books do turn philosophical, and I think that that's sort of the point that he, like, Meta is trying to make. And this is not Frederick Bachman, this is just another Swedish writer, Jonas Johansson. But I think the point is that your actions do, like, he went through life trying to avoid any type of conflict or just switching sides, and he ends up creating the atom bomb. Like, he ends up doing all of this stuff that is extremely important. And I do think that that's like a little bit his point. And I think that the other philosophical point that he's trying to make here is just like how Alan does sort of treat friends. And I think he treats people very well around him and
Mhm.
is very open and accepting. And like that pays off every single time throughout the entire book. Just being
True.
nice and being open and just go with the flow, like, just keeps paying off. And I do think
Great
that's a
point,
little
Phil.
bit of the point as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I really like those takeaways.
Yeah. I got the like being open to other people. He
Mhm.
was friends with, he went to China to fight the communists, then was like,
He was
this
friends with
isn't
Harry
really
Truman.
like that chill. What's going on here? So I'm going to help this woman escape. But I don't, it's not because I have a sympathy to the communist cause. Just, I don't think this woman should be like, you know,
This should be happening to
yeah,
her.
raped and then murdered. So I'm going to get
Right.
on out of here. And then he becomes friends with the Russian scientist, but then is confronted by Stalin. And he's like, well, I'm not
this
going to
guy
buy
sucks.
into
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
propaganda and beliefs in this.
Well, and
But he
and
was,
Stalin was mean to
yeah,
him,
but he
so
was
he was like
polite
not
the
about
whole
Stalin.
time and just like
Mhm.
kind of, yeah. So I completely agree. This openness to accept everybody and to be willing to listen to them, and also, but also be like, look, I'm not going to discuss these things with you. I'm not
Right.
getting dragged into the quagmire of your beliefs that are causing all your problems.
Yeah.
Another really funny thing is when
Yeah.
he's fighting with Stalin, and Stalin, when he gets mad, refers to himself in the third person.
Third person. I really wanted to do that was hilarious. And I wanted to do was it true or not for our
Yeah,
opener. But I think like none of it was true. Like, was the third Einstein true?
it's
Like,
not.
did
I looked
Stalin
him
speak in
up.
the third person? Okay.
I looked up
Okay.
Herbert
And I looked up
Einstein. He's not true. He's not real. Amanda
I
Einstein is
I
not
looked
real.
up I looked up if Kim Jong Un called Stalin uncle because I thought
Oh
that was
yeah.
funny how he was
uh,
Uncle Stalin is dead. And he was crying.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I think I liked those. And the other thing that just drove that point home, I think, was the foil with the Never Again gang, where they were also a gang that was constantly breaking the law, and they had no fun. I mean, they all died and they all got captured. And like, that was sort of the foil of like, okay, here's a gang that is committing crimes. Not everyone's on the same team, and they are not going to work out. Whereas, like, here's these old guys that are just living life and they commit crimes and get away with it and have a bunch of money at the end. And I thought that that was a very cool foil, how you saw that those two gangs were at the same time breaking the law and just operated very differently and had very different outcomes as well. So I thought that was well done.
Yeah. I think your point about him consistently being not political and and Isaac, you kind of mentioned this too, like he just went with his gut. If he liked the person, he did what they wanted. If he didn't, he just didn't do it. And I think it's a good lesson for people today to be way less political than they are. I mean, the issues that he was dealing with were very intense, and he just kind of had this devil may care. I think that's obviously not how the real world works, but I think it was refreshing to read about in a book, at
Yeah, I
least,
think it
and
was
it was well
basically
executed.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it was basically trust your moral compass because the rules around you in the world are constantly changing, whether you jump from Mao's China to Stalin's Russia to Truman's US to
Yeah,
modern day Sweden. Like they're going to have different rules and different morals. And that doesn't make them right just because some powerful people said they were. And so, like, you
yeah,
have a moral compass yourself, trust it, and likely you will end up on the right side of history. And I thought that was a
yeah,
cool
Yeah.
point.
One
yeah.
knock on Alan's moral compass, I will say, his laissez-faire attitude continuing into just the murder of human beings. Like
Yes.
he talks like you had a
As
good
long
quote
as
where
they
like
deserve it.
yeah. But the fact
Yeah.
that within days of him escaping from his old folks' home, he's killed like
He killed like
He
I
three
killed
think
like
people.
3 people.
at
Yeah.
least two, but maybe three. I'm trying to remember people. And just really was just like, well, that's how it goes. I think
Yeah,
there
Yeah.
is a little bit of a line. And I don't know if it was a translation thing, if that was written in there purposefully, or what it was. That it wasn't off-putting, but it was slightly. This really isn't a realistic book anyway, so I don't want to use the word like
Right.
right.
realistic. But it kind of was in jarring is too extreme. But it was sort of just like, wait a second, are we really we're
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
cool with this? Like,
When
like
yeah,
I could see it being an accident, but then it just they all kind of were intentional accidents that like worked out, but just how they
yeah.
were just like, well, someone else is dead. I'll just keep
I think
moving
when
on.
he's 100, I think that is a little
That could
bit.
be a thing
Yeah.
He
too.
didn't. Yeah, I think he lived his life honestly, even when he wasn't 100, as like, if I die, I die. And I think he did impose that on everyone around him. And
Yeah.
I don't think it
Yeah,
was malicious. It was just a little bit lack of caring. Like Phoebe had talked about how it only impacted him. And the one quote where he kills the first person, he's like, to end up in the freezer was not the end of the world. Well, it was
it
in a
was.
way, but not in a bad way. And he's just like,
And like that first
Well,
corpse, they're making jokes about him, like asking him, like,
yeah.
"Hey, is it okay if we put you on this cart and take you to the market?" They're both
When I
like,
think it was funny
both guys
because
are just like,
Julius is not an okay guy. Julius is a bad,
he was a shady
like,
yeah,
character.
shady character,
Yeah,
but by the end, like him and Benny sort of turned Julius and made sure that he was doing an okay thing with the money. Like,
right,
yeah. I mean, it was funny too because, like you said, Isaac, he's killing all these people, and really, Alan did not have to steal that suitcase. That was just out of
right.
the
yeah. He
blue.
was just
There
like,
was
"Well,
no
it's
need.
here.
He
I'm
started
going
the
for it."
whole thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, like the drug lords were like, okay, but you started this. Like we need to get this suitcase back. So it was funny that
yeah.
he didn't really.
There were glimpses of him not necessarily wanting that to happen. Like he becomes
Right.
friends with Francisco Franco because he decides he doesn't want to blow this bridge up with all
The
those
bridge up,
people on it.
right?
Um, and then when they hit the boss with the van or with the bus, they rescue him out
Yeah,
of the van and
they
don't leave
save
him to
him.
die, even though he's actively trying to hunt them down and kill them. And then it turns
Right.
out they're friends with them anyway. So there is like a little juxtaposition there, but that was one thing with the kind of laissez-faire, carefree, what happens that I was like, this seems a
Yeah,
little
maybe a step
far,
too far.
maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It didn't bother me, but I see why you felt that way. I definitely get your point.
I think that another thing I want to say that's a little bit off this topic is just I think reading foreign books, something that I am not like astute enough is this a good translation? And like a lot of
Good
classics are
point.
constantly translated. I mean, I do think that this was a phenomenal translation. I think that this book was likely written in the Swedish exactly the same and read very similarly. And I think that
Mhm.
that's a skill that is very undervalued, I guess, by myself of just getting the same sort of dry humor across in a different language is definitely not translated word for word, right? So like it is someone reading this book and then trying to rewrite the humor in the English language. And I do think that was really, really well done.
I thought so too. There was points where I've read books, especially like the one that's coming to mind is Anna Karenina, where I desperately wish I could have read it in Russian because I think there was a mass amount of information. Like if you read the Russian version, it's like 60 hours long versus the English is 30.
Well,
Like
and there's probably a different translation. Like I wish I would have looked into when I read some of the classics, like which translation to read for this book. Yeah.
Yeah. But this one, yeah, you didn't feel maybe what you were talking about, Isaac, with the laissez-faire of the death, but I think that was intentional.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel at all like I actually didn't really put it together that it was a translation. Like obviously I knew this was written by someone who didn't speak English, but it didn't have any weight in me reading it. So, but that's an interesting point, Phil, that you bring up. So I wanted to hear what you guys thought rating wise. I guess I'm a little surprised by seeing your ratings. I'll let you say what they were, but mine was a 5. I read it twice. So based on our old legacy scale that I keep bringing back every once in a while. And I really enjoyed it just as much the second time. I thought it was funny and I would recommend it to anybody. That's the thing. Like people, I think people who are serious readers, I know right now some people in my life, they're just like want to light read, but this is a good light read. And I don't want to say it's a beach read, but it's just like, it's funny and it's good. I think anyone would enjoy it. So that's why it was a 5 for me. What about you, Isaac?
I said a 4. I don't have a reason to knock it necessarily. Or just like, I know the 5s that we have read are just better books
so good
than this. But this was an amazing book. I agree with you, Phoebe, like, and what an apt opening question for us. Like, what episode and should we listen to, or what book should we read? Like, this is going to be a go-to book recommendation because even if you don't know the person, the humor in here is not going to offend anybody. There's like a little taste of everything. You get a little history lesson in there, and it's a very easy read or a listen to. I thought the narrator did a great job reading.
Was good.
Too.
Agreed.
So yeah, it's a 4. Just because there are 5s out there, and this just doesn't quite get it. But I can't give a empirical reason why it doesn't like quite meet that threshold. Maybe just because it's not as mind altering or life changing, or the kind of read
as some of the other things we've read.
As a 5 would be.
Yeah. I thought you were saying, Isaac, at the beginning where you're like, such an apt way to open up the podcast, when it was the thing that you told me to say, like the opener that you told me to say.
Oh, no.
Being funny.
Yeah.
Great conversation starter.
Yeah. He's working on cutting into conversations.
No, so I also gave...
It was at Phil's. Okay, this is a side note, but at Phil's, this shit was so funny. At Phil's rehearsal dinner for his wedding, I was talking to my best friend's brother, and I knew obviously his whole life. And we're talking, and then Isaac somehow very unsmoothly gets in the middle of our conversation. And I was like, what are you doing? And he was like, I'm working on cutting in to conversations casually. And I was like, well, work a bit harder, because that was like the worst.
I think I was kind of drunk by then, maybe. I don't know.
Yes, you were. And then he tried to play it off as a joke. Like, he was like, guys, I'm joking. And I was doing that. And I was like, no, I genuinely think you were trying. And it was so unsmooth.
And I've talked to nobody new since because my coffee has been so short.
Oh my gosh. JD Wallace can vouch for that. Yeah. Okay. Anyways.
Yeah.
Good points, Isaac. What about you, Phil?
Yeah, so I also gave it a 4 for pretty much the exact same reason. I was, definitely would recommend it to anybody. But if I was like, okay, what's the best book you've read in the podcast? Like, would not include this in the top 3. And then I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I can't really be a 5 here.
Right.
I do want to say that Phoebe just called this book light. And when this book was picked out, I received about 30 minutes of crap from Isaac and Phoebe being like, what is a light book? What is a light? What is a light? What do you mean a light read? And then Phoebe even started it and she's like, he was castrated in the beginning. It's not a light read. So for her to call this a light read is divine consequence.
But it is like,
my gosh.
So Phil, yes, you were 100% correct, because I would not, this is not in the same category as those Frida McFadden and the other like crappy books that are out there that are considered light reads.
Right.
We were calling them beach reads or like cozy reads.
It's not a beach read. It's
they're
a
crappy
light
books.
Read.
This is a light, good book.
Yes.
Well,
and Phil, you were correct, and I was wrong.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
So I needed on now. Yep. And I think if you liked this book, this light read, you should read A Man Called Uwe. It's by Frederick Bachman, as Phil mentioned. Very similar vibes and a good book. Phil, what about you?
Yeah, mine was The Rosie Project by Graham Simpson. I think that it's just also very funny, but
very
has
funny.
like important lessons, not just like all comedy book. It sort of takes the same just dry humor approach as well. So
yeah, totally agree. Isaac, what about you?
Yeah, mine was Heart's Invisible Furies by John Boyne. We read it in season 1. And yeah, definitely not a light read, I would say, but the narrator had a dry sense of humor that perpetuated throughout the book.
Yeah, it made it a lot more easy to read those heavy topics. Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, this was a great discussion. I hope people enjoyed it, laughed a little along the way with us. And before we go, I'd just like to talk about what we're reading next time, which is Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wong. And Isaac, would you just give us a brief summary of that before we go?
Yes, this story follows Siona Freinen, a driven orphan who becomes the first female member of the High Magistracy, and her unlikely assistant, Dommel, who is a member of the Quen class and a former hunter from outside the city. Together, they uncover corruption and a devastating secret about Tehran's magic, forcing them to confront the city's oppressive system and its impact on different groups, including the marginalized people like the Quen. And this is obviously, or maybe not obvious, but it is a fantasy book. So,
Yes. Yeah, back to fantasy. It's been a minute since we've read a fantasy. So excited to talk about that with you guys. I have read this. I enjoyed it. It's very unique, I would say. Not like many other fantasy books. And it's a standalone, which I think that would draw some people in that maybe wouldn't necessarily read a fantasy. So excited to hear what you guys think, and excited to talk with you about that next time. But until then, this is a bi-weekly reminder to call someone that you love, tell them that you love them, tell them about a good book that you recently read. Hopefully it's the 100-year-old man who climbed out the window and disappeared. And until we talk again, stay classy, second pagers. We'll see you later.
Bye, guys.
See you guys.
Let's go beyond.